a real education is trying to learn from the people who are around you and learn from the environment around you. Try to find a way to volunteer in your actual community. So I went through the college admissions process twice,
Yeah.
and it is absolutely a formula.
When we throw a pebble into a lake, it creates like a whole ripple effect. We have the capabilities of creating ripple effects across the entire lake.
I guess I would just tell myself to always remember the serenity prayer. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference.
Hey there, just wanted to chime in before you continue on with the episode. The guest internet connection does go iffy in the beginning, but it does get better later on in the show. So I apologize for that, but nevertheless, I hope you have a pleasant listening or watching experience. All right, that's all for me. Enjoy the show. Episode 2. Kate, welcome to the Pursuit of Light podcast. So glad to have you here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so we briefly connected several months ago through our mutual friend Emma. Shout out, first episode. And
Yeah, it was an amazing first episode. Kudos to both
exactly.
of you.
Yeah. Yeah, Kate, you're someone who strikes me as someone who's really driven and dedicated to the work and the projects that you embark on. So we can start with education because given that our audience is mostly geared towards young people, I think giving like kind of a background of your educational journey would be pretty insightful for many. So could you just briefly introduce yourself?
Yeah, of course. So my name is Kate Wexell, and I'm about to graduate actually exactly 1 month from whenever we're recording this, with a bachelor's
Congrats.
degree in public administration policy. Yeah, thank you so much. I think that my educational journey actually correlates pretty well with the first episode that you guys did with Emma. So everybody should definitely go check out that podcast episode first, and then I'll sort of build off of that. But yeah, I grew up right outside of St. Louis in the Midwest. And then when I was in high school, I was definitely that kid that while I cared about my grades and I did graduate near the top of my class, I had no idea what that meant for college applications. I didn't even know what Stanford was until my senior year of high school. And so in my community, those like top-notch college admission schemes, those weren't really a thing. Like nobody knew what any college was. People were just trying to go to the regional state school. That was really the expectation. And so I spent my time just trying to take the classes that I genuinely enjoyed, which tended to be music classes, foreign language classes, literature classes, and I even made up several classes of my own. And I was more focused on like, what can I actually get out of my education? So at the very end of my senior year, I went up to my superintendent with a long letter discussing all of the things that I thought that she should change about our high school. And she did
Mhm.
call me down to her office and have a meeting. And we reviewed the document, and she told me, yeah, no, Kate, you're a little bit out of your bounds here. We might take into consideration a few points, but for the most part, you need to stop this. Um, which I did not. I mean, I did with her, but that's definitely part of my personality is if I see that something could be done in a more efficient way, then I want to find what is that path towards efficiency. Um, and so then I went off to college. I started off studying journalism at the University of Missouri. I was very, very upset to go there. That was like at the bottom of my list of schools that I wanted to attend, but in the end, it ended up being the most cost efficient. So they're also known to be the second best journalism school in the country. So I thought, all right, I'll give this a shot. And if I don't like it, then I'll just leave. So I ended up spending my entire freshman year with this concept that I was going to transfer. Even starting from our little welcome week, I was like, these are not the kinds of people that I want to be around. I'm going to feel miserable here. And I sort of put myself into this mentality that I wouldn't enjoy it. Um, and then I worked the entire year on going through the transfer admissions process. I did get into Northwestern, Georgetown, WashU, all of those schools. And then by March of my freshman year, I was sort of talking to the other people who had been going along on the transfer journey with me. And I was like, now that I've thought about it, what did I really want this for? I had told people, oh, I'm going to apply to these schools so that I'm surrounded by more motivated people and have more resources and better career opportunities. But then I realized after talking to so many people that went to these top-notch schools, like the top 20 universities in the United States, and I realized that it wasn't actually different there. And the people were somewhat different, but it wasn't enough to justify the cost.
Mm.
So I asked, is there actually another way? And somebody who was from Romania had told me, oh, have you ever thought about applying to Minerva University? And I was like, oh, I've never heard of this. So I looked it up and immediately I was like, yes, this is it. I'm going to apply. And I was accepted. And I did end up turning it down because it, like all the other schools, was way too expensive for me. And I would have had to start over my degree. But it really stuck with me. I started talking to the students that had been accepted with me online. And then, um, yeah, I sort of decided I'm just going to go live with them, say screw it to my university. I'd already told everybody that I was leaving. So I'd said my goodbyes, I'd made my peace, but I ended up moving out to San Francisco to live in the Minerva dorms with the first year students. And I decided to complete my degree online. And because I was able to do my degree online, I managed to convince my university to let me take an overload of classes each semester. I went through a bunch of different loopholes in the system. And so now I'll actually be graduating next month after only 2 years in school.
Wow,
So that was a
that's
very
an
long
yeah,
explanation,
yeah.
but
Yeah, that like to me, that's such an amazing story of how you realize that the system wasn't suiting the best for your needs and what you wanted out of education. So you took you took what you had and you made your own path of education, which I find like really respectable. Yeah. So yeah, we could go off like a lot of points from here, but yeah, yeah, we could just start from like Minerva, because what did you learn from experiencing and connecting with Minervan students, and how did that change your views on education?
yeah, I mean, I actually made an entire YouTube video about this. It's pretty much my only YouTube video.
Yeah,
Um, but I think that what it really all stems from is something that their founder said. Their founder's name is Ben Nelson. He actually came to San Francisco about a week and a half ago, and he told us that universities are not an educational institution, they're a certification institution.
right.
And Minerva is one of the only universities that's actually working to change that notion. So from interacting with the Minerva students, so first of all, for those who don't know, like the admissions process, you have to go through essentially a series of IQ tests and then emotional intelligence tests. And so that's how they're able to not only select people who have done and accomplished great things in their life and have potential to accomplish great things on paper in the rest of their life, but they also select people who they know are going to be good human beings. And they also select them from very, very diverse regions. So that's really what I took away from the students was like, you're surrounded by all of these people who have, built hospitals when they were teenagers, who have published multiple books, who have run nonprofits, created their own startups, won international hackathons. Uh, but then you're all able to share your culture and experiences with each other and genuinely be collaborative. And then you learn from the city that's around you. So I think that what that taught me is that a real education is trying to learn from the people who are around you and learn from the environment around you. And I guess that could go into one of the reasons that I realized I wouldn't have been happy at any university really is just because a lot of traditional universities, and it's a little bit different in other countries from what I've noticed,
Right, right.
but a lot of universities, you're sort of stuck in that campus bubble and you're not really given the opportunity to interact with what are the harsh realities of life. Like even down to just basic necessities. Like at a college campus, you're given all of your food, you're given your housing, you don't have to think about any of it. But in the real world, like coming out here to San Francisco, living with the Minerva students who don't have a campus, like you have to think, how do you cook everything? How do you actually pay rent? How do you get a job? How do you, fill out these legal forms? But then your gym is just the regular community gym. You're seeing people who have lived here for decades. You're walking around on the streets and you're not surrounded by college students who are going through all the same experiences as you. You might get stopped on the streets by somebody who has lived a completely different life from you and has completely different perspectives. So that's how you gain a real education, is listening to people's stories and becoming immersed in that.
Yeah, that's such a great perspective. Yeah, as someone who's freshman at UCLA, I can definitely relate to how a campus feels like a whole bubble. To be honest, I've heard like people say how sometimes college feels like a resort where everything's just given to you
Yes.
and you don't really have the opportunities to actually go into the city and go into your outside environment and actually kind of connect with the people that do live in that area. So for people that do take the route of a traditional university, um, like given that you're graduating and all, what are some ways that someone can make their most of their time at university, given that they might be stuck on campus without as many opportunities as someone in Minerva would?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, first of all, there are always other options. And that's definitely a difficult thing for people to wrap their minds around, because a lot of people will come up with barriers to do what I did, which was just flat out leave. And of
Yeah.
course, that's not right for everybody. But while I was still on campus and I was feeling unhappy, um, some things that I did was I realized probably a little bit too late, the clubs on campus, they mean nothing other than that's how you can meet really cool people to be friends with. But otherwise, they are not going to be the things that are teaching you the skills for the real world.
Hmm.
I would say instead, try to find a way to volunteer in your actual community, not necessarily through a volunteering service club on campus, uh, but like reach out to real organizations, become a leader within those so that you can learn about the town that's surrounding you. Um, a lot of universities are catching on to the fact that people need more practical hands-on experience. So try to get involved in those types of things. Find the courses that essentially set you up with an internship within the course, um, or find the courses that are actually prompting you to think about real world challenges and create a prototype and actually act on the things that you're thinking about. Um, yeah, so do some of those things. If research is what interests you, then like actually just go join a research lab. But don't focus on the superficial aspects of college. Like figure out what are the things that you genuinely want to get out of it. What are the skills that you want to have? Take those courses, make sure that you are actively engaged.
Yeah. I guess on the related notes, regarding like the college application process for high schoolers out there, because we all know it's a whole like system and a whole game to kind of win and
Oh,
see what
absolutely.
prizes you get.
Yeah.
So for those who are in the process of applying to colleges and and kind of wanting to have a good education that actually supports and nurtures their growth, is there any words of like advice you would give them?
Um, yeah, so I guess I went through the college admissions process twice,
Yeah,
and it is absolutely a formula. So you gaining admission to a top school does not mean that your life is going to go perfectly. It does not mean that you actually
right.
have emotional intelligence. It does not mean any of those things. Similarly, if you're not accepted, it does not mean that you are lacking intelligence or motivation or potential in life. So you just have to be aware of that, that there are just certain populations within the world that already know the checklist of things that you need to have. Um, and you just need to focus on like what will actually give you that real education. So I would say try to look for schools that have study abroad opportunities. Try to look for schools that are known to give students lots and lots of opportunities to try things out and have those practical applications. look for the places that are like Minerva. There are a few other universities around the world that are popping up that are very, very similar. Or honestly, look at universities that are in other countries, like European universities. They're almost entirely hands-on, and they're usually more similar in the sense that they don't have an ornate campus that you're living
Mm.
within. Yeah.
That's a great answer. Kind of going on the topic of study abroad. You studied abroad at University of Oxford, am I correct?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah, so I
so
studied abroad twice.
yeah, so I saw like an Instagram post you made on like your takeaways from the whole experience. What was like one major lesson that you've learned from putting yourself into a completely different country and studying for some time there?
Um, yeah, so the two times that I studied abroad were when I went to the University of Oxford. And so we actually went to lectures that were run by the professors there, within sort of that British educational system. And it is a different class structure. Um, and then I also studied abroad in Peru, and that was a lot more uh, volunteering work. So it wasn't necessarily class work. That was more of like actually going out and interacting with nonprofits in the community and talking to the people there. In both cases, obviously the countries are very different, the culture is very different, but I would say you can learn most from just talking to the people who are there and genuinely trying to listen to them and hear about their life experiences and compare and contrast what is similar and what is different. Ask them about what are the problems that they're experiencing, what are the things that they've tried to do to solve them, and think about how you can apply that to the world back where you live.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess going on your whole trip to Peru, which happened more recently, what did you learn about community building? Because, given that US is becoming more increasingly polarized and more, I guess, individualistic, what are some like things you could take from your time at Peru and kind of implement this more communal type of living into the US and into our daily lives?
Yeah, yeah, of course. So, first of all, I just want to state that that communal type of living is not specific to Peru. Uh,
Hmm.
I've traveled to over 10 different countries in the past few years, and it was actually found in almost every single one of those countries that I went to. I think that it's like a uniquely American thing to
Yeah.
not have that strong sense of community. And I could go into a whole other conversation about urban planning and like why that is. Um, but Peru had a very special form of it since it's more of an agrarian society, uh,
Right.
particularly in the small rural villages in the Andes, because I was in Cusco. So I was right next to the mountains, or I was literally in the mountains. Um, you had these villages where people were planting crops. And so then the entire village, they would just plant enough food for them to eat. And then everybody would come together and help each person, harvest their field and work on the agricultural aspects. So it wasn't just like, oh, this is one person's field and uh, they're just going to take care of that. And we have our own field. It was like an entire community effort. And then the same thing with the markets. Like, of course, you're selling things during the day, but then at 5 p.m. every day, if anybody was homeless or hungry or just in need, people just give out the food for free. So it's just placing that human empathy above your own selfish needs. And I think that a big part of that comes from just close proximity. Like if you're just stuck in your house all day doing your remote work and you talk to maybe two people in 24 hours, like you're never going to care about other people, right? Like you're
Right.
just trying
Right.
to get through the day. You're just trying to figure out how you can survive. But if you surround yourself with others, like how could you not have that empathy and compassion for other people? Uh, I think that within the United States, a way that we could help with that is create less single family housing, create more density, more walkable cities. A big struggle is just with people's commute times. Like, say that you're a mother, right? You have to spend how much time in the morning dropping your kids off at school and then driving to the grocery store and then
Right.
driving to go get your kids again and then driving them to each place. Like, that's all time that instead, if you were in a walkable location, you'd be walking your kids to school with other mothers, talking to them, hearing about their lives, making them feel cared about. Uh, and I guess that's just true for anybody. So how do we incorporate that into the United States?
Yeah, that's great. It's like changing our physical environment to be suited towards a more community-centered way of living.
Mhm.
Yeah, I guess kind of going on like the whole community building in the US, I think recently what I've been seeing is a lot of people who come together with a similar interest kind of all come together and they kind of create something cool. And like I've been seeing that pop up like throughout Silicon Valley with all like the
Oh yeah.
programming, hackathons, all that type of stuff. So I think that's a great addition to the America to like the whole American landscape nowadays, having more of that
Yeah.
community shine through in certain areas. Yeah, I
Mhm.
guess one question I have regarding walkability and urban design, because I'm also interested in that type of stuff. So like I've
Yeah,
been
yeah,
watching
it's so
like
cool.
yeah, like I've been watching so many like YouTube videos on the whole how European cities are so well designed and how America needs to step up their game.
Uh-huh.
So you also made several short videos regarding that topic, and I'm wondering what are what's like something that America can do to create more walkable cities and have a better objectively seeking urban design.
Oh, that's such a loaded question because
Yeah,
I mean there are entire YouTube channels about it for a reason.
yeah.
Um, I guess just to preface this for anybody listening, if you guys are interested in learning more about this, then watch YouTube videos and read books from the channels Not Just Bikes and then Strong Towns. Strong
Oh,
Towns is a
so
pretty
good.
active
Those two
nonprofit.
channels. Yeah.
Um, yes, yeah, I'm actually going to the Strong Towns conference this summer. So if anybody is going to be there, then let me know. So a lot of it would probably revolve around zoning regulations and then mandatory minimum parking. So for those of you who don't know what mandatory minimum parking is, that's where in the United States, like if you could build a new construction, then for the amount of people that are able to fit inside of that building, you're supposed to have parking for all or most of those people. So that's how you end up with a giant like supermarket parking lots like at Walmart
Mm,
that end up taking up so much space. So a lot of the things that need to happen are just getting rid of those regulations. So don't make parking required. Don't make it so that people can only have a building serve the use of a store or a home. Some of the great things about San Francisco are whenever you have like a little shop at the bottom of a building, and then
mm,
people can still live in the 2 stories above that, right?
right.
So you can fit like 5 or 6 people into the building and it still has a business. And then that's how you're able to walk down the street and go to the supermarket and go to the dentist and the doctor. And, you're able to just fit more things into the same space. Um, I think that people need to get a little bit more used to that type of lifestyle as well. I know people don't want to share their house with another family, um, but that would really help out. And then just making things more dense. A big problem is just with suburbs in general.
Right.
Anybody who has listened to any urban planning videos, the first thing that people complain about is just the invention of suburbs. And that is a uniquely American thing. I believe that it's also spread to Canada. But
Yeah.
before it was like cities were designed where you have a city center and then everything sort of just spreads out from there. Now we have these little pre-planned suburbs. So it's all these windy streets with houses that are spread out and there's nothing else in there. So that makes it so that you have to drive everywhere because there's just physically more space. Um, but then there's less to do. It's harder to walk over and see your neighbor. It ends up decreasing the community cohesion. And then just economically, your taxes have to go towards funding the repavement of those streets. A town is actually losing money for every new suburb. So that's why you've seen in towns where this experiment was first created, like Detroit, like St. Louis, pretty much a lot of places in the Midwest, you're starting to see them become ghettos now. And a lot of it is because the
Right.
infrastructure is destroyed because cities can't actually afford all of the roads. So,
Yeah, 100%. Because I think what makes European and also Asian cities work so well is they really incorporate the whole mixed use development. and
Yeah.
they basically
Mhm.
say like no to cars, right? And I feel like the whole car
Yeah.
centric culture that is so pervasive in America, it really is kind of almost like the root of almost a lot of the problems that American cities face today because of the like
Yeah.
without cars, there's no suburbs, right? Yeah, so and we kind of
Mhm.
prioritize the whole convenience of using a car rather than, walking down the street or taking public transport, which has led, the whole
Mhm.
public transport game in America to be quite deteriorating, as we all know.
Mhm. Yeah, and then
Yes,
it's like a perpetual cycle of like nobody will take public transportation because it's inefficient. And so then you buy more cars and
right,
then
right.
less people want to take the public transportation. Yeah. So it's not ever going to be repaired if people keep feeding into that cycle. It's actually kind of funny because uh building off what you said about how it causes a lot of problems with the car dependency. In one of my classes, I had a classmate who she was trying to say that the United States should get rid of like bans on people's driver's licenses for different infractions like a DUI and getting too many tickets. And her reasoning was that if you don't have your driver's license, then you can't drive to the grocery store and you can't go to school and you can't go to work. And I had to respond to her and be like, no, if you have a DUI, you should definitely have your license taken away. I think that the
Yeah.
problem here is that your town isn't walkable, so you can just go to those places anyway. Like that should be your human right, honestly.
Yeah, we could totally dive into like urban planning even more, but I want to pivot on some of the like side hobbies that you do because you do a lot of stuff. You do, not only do you run nonprofits and do a lot of stuff in that, you also play classical piano. You also, I've seen you do poetry as well. So I guess I
Yeah.
wanted to ask, how do all of your creative pursuits kind of tie in together, and does it speak of a particular part of you?
Um, I don't think that they tie together. I
Mm,
think that in a lot of ways they're just outlets, right? I think that that's what a lot of creative pursuits are because
right.
in the past, a lot of people had told me you should study piano. That should be your thing in life. I'm personally not as good at piano as you are, so I told them,
Oh no.
hell no. Um, uh, but I did teach piano for several years. And yeah, I've published a couple of books. One of them was a poetry book, and a lot of those things I had thought long and hard about, like, do I want this to be a career? And I had to tell myself no, because I wanted to find more efficient ways to solve those problems. And I wanted for the creative outlets to just be a thing for me, right? Like that is the one part of me that is like how I'm able to have my soul speak, right? Like that's my version of expressing myself. And the second that you monetize that, it just
Right,
takes
right,
it all away. Yeah. Um, So I realized I could just separate like the work that I want to do in the world and like trying to find solutions to different global problems from those creative aspects of things. And that's
right.
been a
Yeah,
difficult transition.
yeah, it's hard because, I've heard stories where people who kind of go all in into their creative pursuit, and when they try to monetize it and, make a living out of it, that's a whole different story. And some people have kind of burned out or even quit what they were doing because of that need to make money. So there's always that, path of, having a more central focus and just having your creative pursuits as something that you just do for your own sake
Mhm.
of it.
Yeah, and like I know that you have a Substack. Emma has a Substack. After I saw your guys's and all of your beautiful thoughts about the world and existence, I was like, oh, I should make my own Substack.
Yeah,
And then I realized it would fall into that same pathway of like, I already have to create so many newsletters for the jobs that I do and the
yeah,
organizations that I run and things like that. And it would just end up being one more task to complete. Right.
yeah. Hmm.
Uh, yeah.
Yeah.
Recently,
So
where I found myself with sort of those creative pursuits is it's like, all right, here's a moment where it's Easter and I'm sitting on the train headed to church and looking out the window and there's a gorgeous sunset. And it's like, oh, in this moment, I feel inspired and I want to write a poem because the world deserves to be documented. in that way. Or like, oh, here's a beautiful piano piece that every time that I hear it, it makes me see these colors that correlate with just gorgeous things in this world and beautiful memories that I've made. And like, this is a way to sort of honor it.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way of looking at it. Yeah. I mean, you've done so many things, and how did you learn to say no and focus on the fewer things that actually matter to you? Yeah.
Um, I don't think I've learned that lesson yet.
Uh,
Um, and actually, there's a really good book called The 10X Rule, and
mm,
the lessons in it maybe should not be followed by everybody, but one of the things that it does say is just don't say no, because the second that you say no, you're going to miss out on fantastic
Oh,
opportunity.
interesting. Yeah.
Like try to
Mm,
take on as many things as you can. That's sort of the
mm,
philosophy that I've followed. Because that way you get to just learn so much more. I would
yeah.
say that the times when you do actually need to say no is just when it's reached the point that you have so much on your plate that you're not able to put in quality work to the things that you're doing. So only at that point do you think about like, all right, what is actually benefiting the most people? Who actually needs me to work on this the most? And if there's somebody that you're doing something for and they really don't need it as much, then that's when you say, like, hey, I need to step back.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me of the whole concept of like when you're starting off, you really want to um diverge on everything you try to do and just try to say yes to as many opportunities and that
Mhm.
come your way. And when you finally, I guess when you find something that you want to dial into, you kind of diverge into that one thing and begin kind of shaving away the things that don't matter too much to you. So yeah, that kind of reminds me of that. How like in the beginning, especially when you're exploring, you want to say yes to a lot of things. Yeah. So I guess regarding your nonprofit work, for those who I'm not sure what sorry, for those who are not sure what you do, could you briefly describe the Compass online?
Yeah. So when I was 16, I started writing for this online platform, and it was meant to promote different cultures. And I just didn't really like how the platform was operating. It was going more in the direction of just creative writing and interviews. And I wanted to have a place where you could have like both that creative aspect of people's lives, where they can like freely express their feelings about their culture, but then also a way that people could get like just genuine factual information to better understand others. And so the Compass Online, it started off um, when I was a senior in high school. Yeah, because I started my senior year of high school at 16.
Yeah.
um, And so originally it was just like information about all of the different major world religions, all of the different countries in the world, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and then I had like a literary magazine and art gallery on the side. And then as time has gone on, we've had different iterations. And so now we want to be sort of an e-learning platform. Uh, so we just released a new pilot course about a month ago that is about sustainable development goals. So now instead of it being static web pages, it's more of like interactive courses that actually have tangible assignments that walk you through like how do you create an organization? How do you actually apply the sustainable development goals in your own community? So we're working on different things like that. So, sort of non traditional educational topics that people can look at that would have a real impact in their community. So, I'm not phrasing this well, but for example, the other courses that we're currently working on are ones about menstrual health, cultural writing. So, how do you take like a journalistic approach? How do you take like a creative writing approach? All of that to explaining your culture to others. And then one more is about more of professional development, but particularly for those who are in other countries, not the United States, wanting to break into the job market here.
Mm.
And then one about how to apply to college specifically for like low income and rural students. So those are all on the works right now. Not usually the things that you're going to find at a university, right? Um, but then the second component is now that you know about global issues and all of these different topics, like where can you actually go to volunteer and apply those? So we have like an AI chatbot that will help to match you up based on your skill set and your location and all of your different interests with relevant volunteering opportunities. And then we also have a third component. It's more of a forum where people can actually share what they're working on and gain inspiration from other people. So that was definitely not like a 1 minute pitch. So don't tell all the venture capitalists out there how bad I am at pitching. Uh, but
I mean, I think that was a very comprehensive like overlook of your
yeah,
whole company. Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, what draws you to work in these like nonprofits and these organizations?
I think that it's just been my whole life. I mean, growing up, every once in a while, I would wonder why did my parents find each other? And I realized it was because of their same dedication to wanting to help their community.
Oh,
So
yeah.
when I
Mhm.
was 4, I joined Girl Scouts. And then once girls were allowed to join Boy Scouts in the United States, I joined that as well. So my entire childhood was spent doing community service through these organizations. And so I realized like nothing else actually matters, right?
Mm.
Besides just the relationships that you have with other people and
Right,
your
right.
capacity to help others. And so I didn't know that there were other alternative ways that you could help people. That was not something that was publicized in the Midwest. It was like,
Mm.
oh, corporations actually do have a lot of philanthropic endeavors and ways that they help out people as well. So now that I've learned more, especially since moving to San Francisco, there are other routes besides just nonprofit work, but that was the most obvious one to me. So yeah, I sort of, when I got to college, got involved with different sustainability nonprofits. I ended up interning at a lot of them. Now I work for an educational nonprofit that's here in the Bay Area. I think that all of my professional work, other than teaching piano, has been for nonprofits.
Well, I love the dedication. Yeah, if you do have one, like what's your vision in life? Like what are you kind of working towards?
Oh, isn't that the $1 million question?
Yeah.
uh, yeah. I would say that the overall vision is just to try to help as many people as possible in the most efficient way possible with the greatest capabilities that I have. I really don't like the notion of people just following one singular path in life and just focusing
Right.
on one singular thing. I have never been that person. I've always been the jack of all trades. Um, And so I just wanted to see what is the right timing, what are the skills that I have, and how does that all fit into improving the quality of people's lives?
Wow, amazing. Yeah, what drives you to believe that you want to make a world a better place? Because usually when people like embark on such, a grand mission, there's usually some, reasoning behind the actions and the perspective they take in life.
I think it's more from a philosophical standpoint. Uh, I overthink things a lot. And when you have that existential question of like, why do we even exist? What is even the purpose? What is the impact? It's like the only thing you can really think of is, oh, in millions of years, none of us will exist and this will matter. But if you think about the world more as like a circle and more as an
Mhm.
infinite game that we're playing, where we're all going to impact it in some way, it's like,
Right.
what do you want that outcome to actually be? Like, even if right now we're thinking in terms of human society and how can we improve that, eventually human society will no longer exist. And then it becomes, well, what was our impact on the planet? And eventually the planet will no longer exist. So then it's just like, what is our impact on the stardust that we become?
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So I don't think that I could live with the logical fallacies of any other answer. So like, what's the meaning of life?
Mm.
That
Yeah.
was probably a little bit too deep.
No,
But
that was a cool perspective. Yeah. What did what
I don't
did
know.
you
What do you think about it?
Oh man, there's so many ways you can take it, but if we're talking about the meaning of life, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's a really good answer, which basically says like the meaning of life is whatever meaning you put behind it, right? But I think for me, it's because we're all seeds, we're all like tiny specks in the universe, and I guess kind of what you say, like one person already has the power to make even a small dent in the universe, and I kind of imagine ourselves as, when we throw a pebble into a lake, it creates like a whole ripple effect, and that kind of reminds me of like who we become and what we do in this lifetime. We have the capabilities of creating ripple effects across the entire lake. So I guess for me, it's just with the work that I do and the person I become, I hope to make at least some sort of dent in the universe in a good way, to inspire, to impact, to just make it a little bit better from which I was born in, you know.
Yeah. And I really like the idea of Buddhism. I think that I have a very simplified view of it because I'm not going to pretend that I completely understand all the intricacies
Yeah.
of a
Hmm.
different religion that I was not raised with. Uh, but it's interesting because in Buddhism, they don't try to place a label on your identity like we try to in Western culture. It's more just like your identity is composed of these five ever-changing components. And then the overall goal, like you're not trying to reach heaven or hell or any type of afterlife. Like that doesn't exist because honestly, I've struggled with the notion that there even is an afterlife for several years now.
Yeah.
Um, but it's more just like how can you improve the quality of life for other people? And that's how you gain karma and then eventually reach a stage of enlightenment. So it's like over the course of these different lives, which I don't know that I necessarily believe in reincarnation, but it's more just the idea of it. It's supposed to be like you continue to exist until you have helped other people enough that you deserve to be laid to rest. At least that's my interpretation of it. And I kind of
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah, that's beautifully
Yeah.
said. Yeah. What was something that you grew up believing to be true but turned out to be false?
Oh,
Yeah.
oh, there are a lot of things with that. Let's see. Probably that expensive clothes are not worth it because they cost too much, when in reality, they'll last you longer, at least in some cases.
Mm,
That's probably not the answer you were looking for. A lot of things with
yeah.
finances. I was told to never gamble your
Yeah.
money in any capacity, and it's never good to go into debt. And then after coming to San Francisco and meeting people who actually know what they're talking about with finances, it's like, no, it is okay to play the stock market if you know what you're doing. Um, oh, there was also the notion, and this has been really interesting, just that the amount of wealth that you have is completely dependent on how hard you work. And that is not true at all.
Oh
Otherwise,
yeah.
my parents would be millionaires right now.
Right. Yeah.
So
That
that's
is a
like
big notion.
very
Yeah.
much a Midwestern mindset, or probably just anywhere that's not a big city in the United States. That's like a very real mindset. Um, and also just that you have to follow this completely traditional path. Like I know I was pretty much told growing up, like you have to go to the 4-year university, go for all 4 years, and then after that you get your full-time job and buy a house, and then you get married, and then you have children. And honestly, the timelines for that were pushed up way farther than they are in the Bay Area. It's been kind of shocking to see
Right.
people get married in like their 30s. I was not used to that growing up.
Mm,
Uh, but then it's like in reality, the only way that you can actually become a millionaire, going back to that, is if you either start putting money into your Roth IRA immediately at age 18, or if you build your own business. And that's pretty much it. Um, and then your timeline can really look like whatever you want it to look like. And as
yeah.
long as you can just imagine yourself doing something, like really the biggest obstacle to achieving that is not the style timeline, but it's more of your own mental barriers.
Right. Yeah.
If you want to do
I mean,
something, just do it.
Yeah, because like as children growing up, we're all given the scripts of like, oh, you gotta do this
Yeah.
between the ages of X to Y, right? And then
Yeah.
breaking out of that notion and really like keep going on a path where you create your own timeline, that could be a pretty hard thing to do because you really have to
Hmm.
break down all of the preconceived notions that you've accumulated throughout childhood and all these years of growth and to have that courage to like, nope, I this is not it. I should do my own way, you know?
Hmm. Yeah, and the trick to do that is to just be skeptical of everything. Your parents tell you, oh, marriage should be for ages, I don't know, let's just give a
Yeah.
random number, 25 to 30. And you ask them, well, why? It's like, well, you need to graduate from college first. You need to have an established career. You need to have enough money. But then it's like, all right, well, say that you're 22 and you've met all of that criteria. Is there still actually a good reason for why you shouldn't? You know,
Yeah.
that's just the most immediate example that pops in my head.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's a
so
good
it's more of
example.
just general guidelines and like finding out why are these why do these societal rules exist? What are they trying to protect us from? And then if you can find the loopholes to that, I mean, you can do whatever you want.
Right, right. Yeah, so I guess or after living in San Francisco for some time now, when you how do you view your hometown? Is there like a perspective change in the way you see your
Oh,
hometown?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, there are some things that I don't miss at all. Like when I went back at Christmas for the first time, I realized just how big all of the parking lots were and just how
Uh,
dead everything was. There's
mm,
no diversity, there's no culture. It's all just big box stores. It hit me that like the commute from my house to the grocery store, which in my mind before had been a very, very close drive, it
mm.
could fit my entire neighborhood in San Francisco or quite possibly like half the city.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So there are things like that that I'm very grateful to be in San Francisco and not there. But then there
Yeah.
were other things like ah, just the culture there is a lot more open. It's a lot more friendly. People will actually come together if you are in need. There are those simplicities of life that I do miss.
Mhm.
Like when I go back home and I talk to my friends there, I mean, none of them are talking about, oh, here's the next marketing agency I'm going to start and the new
Yeah, yeah.
nonprofit I'm forming and the startup that I'm running, which it's super cool that I have friends here that are like that. But
Yeah.
it's more just like them talking about, oh, I want to try to be the best husband, wife, father, mother, friend, family member that I can be, and what are the steps that I'm going to take for self-improvement to reach that goal.
Mm.
There are no desires of great wealth or uh, success on paper, but it's more just like people want to just focus on how do you be a good person? How do you find
Yeah,
your own
yeah.
personal happiness?
Yeah. Which side do you does sorry, which side appeals to you more right now?
Oh.
Yeah.
On days that I'm feeling burnout, definitely the how can I be a good wife and mother
Mm,
and
yeah.
friend and family member?
Yeah.
Um, and then I'm like, there are some days that I kind of just want to clean a house and cook some food for my family again and,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, do things like that. Um, but I think that right now I have enough ideas in my head and enough things that I want to pursue that like there still is that motivation and
Right, right.
I want to go after it all. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like when we're young, when we still have that energy and that fire burning within us, we can really
Yeah.
take charge at our ambitions and our goals. And you
Yeah.
can kind of see like when people kind of age after they achieved all these things, they kind of settle down and realize that, oh, what makes you happy is just the simplicity of life itself.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've not quite hit that stage yet. Oh, I guess that is another thing that I did notice about my hometown.
Mm.
Like growing up, I had always sort of judged my family members who live out in the rural countryside. And I was like, oh, well, you could have chosen any place on earth to live. And you chose here in the middle of nowhere where the weather is terrible. And like the only thing that you're doing is going to work and then riding your horses. And I had been so judgmental for no reason. And
Yeah.
then I realized, like, no, they chose that. They knew that there were other options available. I mean, it's different if you don't know that there are other options available, but it's like that is what they love to do. Like riding horses and raising
Yeah.
them and training them. Like that is their passion. That is what makes them happy in life. They didn't ever want to come to San Francisco. They didn't ever want to do these things. And so, in that sense, I would say that they're more successful than I am by far, and more successful than I'll probably ever be because
Yeah.
they found out early on in life, like, here is what I want my life to look like. And they've been able to maintain that ever since then.
Yeah. It's really about like how you define success.
Mm.
Yeah, because it reminds me of like I took French throughout high school, and my French teacher, she's been teaching French for like over like multiple decades. And back then when I was like really young, in ninth grade, 10th grade, I was like, I'm not gonna be happy doing this. But then, talking to her back in like when I was a senior just a year ago, and then she was telling me how much she enjoyed doing it and how much she loved what she was doing. And to me, I realized that was like the flip in my switch in my head. I was like, wow, this is what it takes. This is what it means to be successful because you enjoy your day-to-day life. You love what you're doing. You're being around amazing people, and like, what more is there? You know? So
Yeah,
it's a profound
honestly,
mental switch. Yeah.
I really, really look up to my father because, like, he and his friends, they all studied computer science in college.
Mhm.
And I know one of his best friends came out to San Francisco and he's been working on startups his entire professional career. And like, I love him. He's amazing. Uh, but I would ask my father sometimes, like, why did you never do that? Why did you stay in the
Mm.
Midwest? And it took him a lot longer to work his way up the career ladder. And he was like, because that wasn't what I wanted. And
Yeah.
my father is like an incredibly, incredibly intelligent man. And we've had some good conversations about balance where he identified he loves riding motorcycles, he loves playing video games.
No.
He finds meaning and purpose in helping out with the Boy Scout troops because it does have a profound impact on these
Right.
kids and their lives and those formative years. Um, it's like that's his way to contribute. And then he makes good money and has a stable job and has enough time that he can spend it with his kids and with his wife. And that was what he wanted.
Yeah.
Like he's smart enough that he could have gone on to do all of these other things that are commercially successful,
Mhm.
but like he just knew, no, I want to prioritize my community and my kids. And I'm really, really
Yeah.
grateful that I heard that. And my mother is the same way. And I always sort of judged her for being a stay-at-home mom for 12 years of my life after I was born, because that wasn't her original intention. Um,
Mhm.
and I was like, well, why didn't you ever go back to work? Did you just waste all of this time? But it's like, no, she wanted to be there for all of my dance recitals and all of my piano recitals and all of those things. So I just hope that one day I can think about what's actually important. But right now I have too much energy to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Just wrapping up with a few more questions. And I want to ask, do you have any people who inspire you, like role models?
So I don't like the concept of heroes, but role
Mm.
models, yeah. I mean, my grandmother, my parents, that's probably it. But yeah.
Yeah, that's great. So we can finish off with the question I asked Emma last time, which was if you were to pass along a single message to your high school freshman self, what would you say?
Yeah, so I guess I would just tell myself to always remember the serenity prayer. So God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. And that's really the biggest piece of advice that you ever need in life.
Wow, beautifully summed up in a sentence or two. Yeah. So, Kate, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. Yeah.
Thank you for having me. It's been
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah. Can't wait to see, all the work and projects you continue to work on in the future. Yeah. Is there
Yeah.
anywhere people can find you? like any social media handles and all that?
So everybody should definitely connect with me on LinkedIn. But then also on Instagram, I'm kate.h.wexell. So that's Wexell.
All right, perfect. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next piece.
All right. Bye.